Archaeology is a cumulative case. It is a vital part, I think, of a historical apologetics. In addition to the philosophical arguments and the arguments from the reliability of the text itself, there's really good arguments that are made by people like Mike Lacuna and Gary Habermas and Dr. Daniel Wallace and other great scholars. But archaeology, I think, is a very strong ally for the historical reliability of the text. Give you one example: the book of Isaiah. Now, critical scholars and liberals will say that Isaiah was actually written late. According to the Old Testament timeline, we think that Isaiah was written at about the 8th century BC. So we're talking about the 700s BC, 700 years before Christ. But again, liberal scholars would say it was written much, much later, and probably not just by Isaiah. In fact, it was very likely not written by Isaiah, they say. It was written by multiple writers, and that it's written very late.
And when you, real quick, when you say late, just because it's hard sometimes for people in BC time, when you say late, you mean closer to the time of Christ.
Yes, much closer to the time of Christ. In fact, probably they would say it was very likely not written by Isaiah. But two things actually argue very strongly that Isaiah is legit historically. Number one, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found the complete scroll of Isaiah that had no chapter and verse divisions between chapters 39 and chapters 40. Because one of the things they would say, liberal scholars would say, that the first part of Isaiah was written by one writer, and then the second part was written by 4 or 5 different other writers. Whereas we've got even by liberal standards, we've got the complete scroll of Isaiah, the Dead Sea Scrolls, at minimum 200 to 300 years before Christ, and there's no chapter and verse divisions in between chapters 39 and chapters 40. So that's just the textual evidence. But not only do we have the textual evidence, we have the archaeological evidence that firmly grounds it, I believe, in the 8th century BC. We've got things like the Sennacherib Prism that's found in, there's actually 3 copies that we know of. One is in the British Museum, one is here in Chicago at the Oriental Institute Museum, and the other one is in the British Museum called the Taylor Prism. And this is a prism written in Akkadian cuneiform that basically says exactly what the Old Testament says about the destruction of the city of Lachish, and also the siegement of Jerusalem in the book of Isaiah. So, and again, I'm just scratching the surface here because there's so much more to it. But we know very much about the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and whoever wrote Isaiah was an eyewitness to the Neo-Assyrian Empire and knew it very well, and knew their policies, and knew their kings, and knew their how they did things. And so we believe that it's written. And then not only that, we've got Jerusalem. You can actually go to Jerusalem. In the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, it says that King Hezekiah, because he knew that this Assyrian king was going to besiege Jerusalem, he actually did 2 things in preparation for the besiegement. He dug a water channel under Jerusalem that was discovered in the 1800s. It's called the Siloam Tunnel. And there was an inscription found called the Siloam Tunnel inscription. And the second thing he did was he broadened the walls of Jerusalem to about 23 to 26 feet thick, because the Assyrians were the bad dudes of the ancient world, and they were experts in siege warfare. So Hezekiah knew they were coming. So in the 8th century BC in Jerusalem, we've got the broad wall of Hezekiah that's been excavated by archaeologists. So I would say that we have archaeology and historical reliability, and they go hand in hand, and they work as a cumulative case.
Have you ever noticed that it's never enough for certain people?
Yeah, exactly. It's never enough.
Yeah, I mean, you could build this entire cumulative case and say, like, everything points to it. There's nothing that points against it, and they would still come up with something, or for some reason to deny it, But it's important for people to know is that this isn't like a blind faith sort of a thing. The Bible is an actual historical document, and everything that we look at, every time we pull something out of the ground, we're finding more and more confirmation. Yep. And like you said, you breeze through like 100 things there. And we could spend a podcast on each one of those.